Morning streaming media, political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, The Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin. Today, we have a very special guest, Peter Smith from the Michael Newton Institute. And Peter is a leader in spiritual hypnotherapy globally and an emerging thought leader in consciousness studies. He speaks regularly at conferences, on radio programs, and has participated in a number of documentaries both in Australia and overseas. Peter is the creator of the Quantum Consciousness Experience and founder of the Institute for Quantum Consciousness. He previously founded the Institute of Hypnoenergetics and the Hypnoenergetics Modality. His first book, Hypnoenergetics, The Four Dimensions, has reached audiences around the world. He has published a number of articles on quantum consciousness, hypnotherapy, life between lives, spiritual regression, and is one of the groups of authors of Memoirs of the Afterlife, the final book in the best-selling Life Between Lives quadrilogy. For the past 6 years, Peter has been president of the Michael Newton Institute for Life Between Lives Hypnotherapy, also known as TNI, an organization founded to continue the inter-life spiritual regression work of Dr. Newton, and is now offered in 40 countries around the world. And Peter has trained therapists across the USA, Europe, and Australia, and in 2013 was awarded the Peggy Newton Award for Outstanding Service to TNI. And his website, Institute for Quantum Consciousness.com, is an overview of this work, and he has a site called quantumconsciousness.com.au, which is his personal site. And I want to tell the listeners, this is incredibly important work. We're talking about where do we go when we die, what is the true nature of our spiritual selves and our physical existences and our simultaneous multidimensional incarnations in past lives and future lives. So this is very important work. It's perhaps the key to the evolution of consciousness in humanity and how we can evolve to another level, higher level of existence. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say?
Oh, just I'm really excited about this. Basically, it's very much like the topological thinking of A.R. Borden and the work that I've been doing with Hal Stone and Jungian psychology, which is basically whatever seems to be a separation or opposite can be spanned. If you can simultaneously take them into consideration, you're at the next level of consciousness. And so this dimension and another dimension, if you can incorporate both, you've got a higher consciousness, and it's very exciting to me.
Welcome, Peter, to our show. Glad to have you back.
Well, it's wonderful to be here again with you.
And is there anything you'd like to add to your bio that I may have missed? Because this is an old bio, but not sure what I post.
Well, that's very thorough, Janet. But I guess, as Dr. Sasha says, that this work is really about bringing new insight and awareness to our people on this planet at this time. We've got a time of great awakening here. There's so many good things happening, and making them available to the public is just such a wonderful thing that you're doing here.
Well, we love your work. And could you maybe slow it down and break it down so our listeners who have not been exposed to your work before can understand what this is and its relevance to the awakening of humanity?
Sure. There's different aspects to ourselves where we're first of all, I guess by my own background, having moved through a lot of these different modalities over the years, one of the wonderful discoveries I made was the Life Between Lives work of Dr. Michael Newton. And those incredible experiences allow us to understand without a shadow of a doubt that we are a spiritual being having a human experience. Now, once we know that, so many things change for us in the way that we see our existence. There's no fear of death. There's an understanding that the chapter that we're in right now is just one chapter in a very long book, and it brings a sense of peace and understanding of our existence that wasn't there before we did that work. Now, having been part of that...
Can you tell us a little bit about Michael Newton Institute work, how he came to some of these revelations about, I guess, what we want to touch on is there were over 7,000, they're not really regressions, I guess they're
Progressions.
They're progressions to what happens after you die. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that procedure, which is the background for this work?
Yeah, sure, happy to. Michael worked for something like 35 years, pretty much in isolation of every other consciousness explorer of the day, because he wanted to go in deeply into this without the influence of anybody else. So his work stands alone as what I believe, and many like me, we believe it to be the most comprehensive mapping of the afterlife ever performed in the history of humanity. Now, these 7,000 case studies, it's an incredible volume of work that he undertook over that period of time. But ultimately, across those 7,000 cases, let's just offer our listeners how he accessed that. He took people back in time into past lives, and then when they got to the end of that lifetime, basically he facilitated them and followed them home into the spiritual realm, and through his methodology and the work that he'd done, he allowed them to stay there and to explore this interlife experience. A lot of the time it had just been viewed as like a grey type, bardo type place, but he found that he could bring a new level of understanding and participation in that bardo that allowed him to map the entire realm itself. Now, these...
There's a lot of people that do past life regression, and what did he do that it made them go deeper into this state that is eluding the other hypnotherapists that take people in the past lives?
Great question, Janet. There's a level of conditioning that is apparent in the work that we do as LBL therapists that allow us to move down into the theta brainwave state. Now, this is far deeper than normal hypnotherapy goes. Now, not only is it about the depth of trance, but it's the conditioning of the methodology that we use on the way through, which basically opens the immortal identity in a way that hasn't been possible before. If you look, for example, of just give you one aspect of that makes this work so profound, is that when we go back in time to that past life, we use the normal timeline approach, which is typical of regression therapy. But then when we move into the pre-birth state in utero, when we're in utero, we ask specific questions and offer the client certain perspectives that activates the superconscious mind. Now, this is part of the brilliance of this work, because when we're in utero, our subconscious for this lifetime is empty. So our conscious mind that comes with us on this journey, though sitting in the background, and the superconscious mind have never been closer together, and we bond them energetically during this process that allows that superconscious mind to stay activated for later in the session.
Wow. That's a question.
No, I understand, but...
Okay, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So we move off, we go to that past life, as I said, we cross over, and with the 7,000 case studies that Michael performed over his period of time, he found that there were very typical experiences. They all replicated each other, and this was, regardless of spiritual belief systems, regardless of demographic, profession, nationality, cultural heritage. All of these things went out the window, and everybody had very similar and sometimes identical experiences of their unique consciousness once they moved into their full spiritual home, the spiritual realm. Now, what characterizes an LBL session is that we'll meet those souls that we incarnate with on a regular basis. We'll have beautiful, loving interactions with our guides and helpers, a spiritual council, visiting a library to, peruse your own Akashic records. I guess the way that I've always put this forward to people when I've spoken about it is when you do past life work, you go back in time and you drop into these past lives in ways that bring an insight and understanding about one of these other chapters in this book that is the lineage of your soul. Now, when we do LBL work, it's like we're in between those drops and we have a horizontal view across that entire lineage of the soul, which helps us understand the patterns and things that have been with us in terms of our soul characteristics and perhaps some of the karmic patterns that have been with us for many lifetimes. All of that is available to us just there. It's right there with us.
Well, that's very interesting. I was with Stan Groff for a number of years. I'm a holotropic breath worker too, and we do that same thing where we see what the consciousness in utero, actually you're even at conception even, and that it's wonderful. That's what gives you the freedom from this life being so heavily dominating all the other consciousnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what we and I love Groff's work, Dr. Sasha as well. His work was profound, and his way to access those altered states was just wonderful. And it's to be able to understand that we are just a window to so many realms of consciousness is what everybody needs to know, and everybody should discover firsthand.
So when I read the books and it happened for years, it stuck with me, a lot of it, and some of the case studies were just amazingly profound. So what stuck with me is that we have a guide. We have a guide that's our guide that we have throughout our existences, no matter where we are. Is that correct? And then we have our council, which helps us do a review of the life we just lived and correlate it with our total existence and our many lives and existences. And then we also have a soul group, correct? We have like a soul group, which is the group that we have a tendency to reincarnate with and have karma. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yeah, that's the typical findings of Michael's work, and can I say as well that we're continuing Michael's work with 250 odd therapists around the world, and whereas Michael started his work with 7,000 cases, I did some estimates with him just a couple of months back as to how many LBLs have taken place on the planet now, and we think it's somewhere around about 30,000 now. Of people and what you say is right, Janet, but what we're seeing as humanity evolves, as we have so many more people doing this work, we are seeing some newer experiences that are variations on the original themes. Let me explain a little on that. We're finding that people are moving into greater levels of consciousness than before. Some of the experiences that are less typical now is, as a soul is further along in their development, and I'm speaking linear time here just for the sake of our human understanding, but of course everything's really happening at once. But in order for it to be integrated back into human form, we need to understand a little bit of, events more chronologically. With some of these souls that are further along, they've left their soul group, they've joined study groups, project teams, and ultimately a lot of them are contributing further to human consciousness and the evolution of humanity on this planet, because the information that we're getting through LBL sessions now is that something big is unfolding, and we're at a crossroads for humanity where we need to understand that what we've been doing up until now no longer serves us if we want to evolve to the next state of being as a species, as a race, as a collective consciousness of humanity. So we're seeing more of those messages come through, and the other thing which is really interesting for us as LBL therapists is we're having more and more souls incarnate who have a diverse soul lineage that involves incarnations on other planets and in other dimensions. And to have a conversation with such a soul in our clinics, even for us, is a life-changing experience.
Yeah, there's a fellow from the UK, what's his name, Simon Parks, who says that his soul lineage is human, reptilian, and the mantis species. So he said that his soul lineage has three major aspects to it. And then you were talking about the groups. I had a regression session back in the late, probably around 1990, 91, and I encountered that I was a planet maker, but I would go in after the planet was formed and work with a terraformer. I was a terraformer. And I got this years ago, and I just said, oh, that's crazy, Janet. You can't be a terraformer. But then when I read the Michael Newton books, and that was one of the things that we do as souls when we're over there. I guess we're simultaneously over there and here. We can do things like projects, like work on terraforming planets.
Well, this is really
absolutely.
A.R. Barton says when 3 to 4% of humanity gets a spiritual consciousness, that is, and they're more concerned with service to others than themselves, then the morphogenic field of humanity itself changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're getting closer to that all the time.
Yeah, 30,000 is very impressive.
So do you have more information on the something big that's about to happen? You know, here in the kind of the UFO paranormal field, people are talking about, pole shift, Planet X, all these negative things, Armageddon, but I keep getting that it's something more like ascension or, like the Great Awakening. What are they getting? What are they reporting?
Well, a lot of the information coming through is to do with a shift in consciousness itself. And, ultimately, the old ways of thinking, they've taken us into a period of history on this planet that's no longer sustainable. And, this isn't just global warming and fossil fuels and all of that sort of stuff. And, as we all know, we live in a holographic universe. And I do believe, and I've heard it many times from my clients, that, all eyes are on our little corner of the galaxy here. And it's like we're being encouraged and supported by beings that are, from other dimensions, from other places. It's like everybody really wants us to succeed, but they can't intrude on the free will of us, and our collective free will as humanity is all that can really bring about the change. Now, many people understand this. Of course, if you simply believed in reincarnation, that would immediately change the way in which you treat your planet, because, we're going to actually be the benefactors of our own legacy. But,
right.
Because
Don't poison your own well.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to poison the world so I can come back and be part of all that. It just doesn't make sense. So, ultimately it's about, we're at a crossroads where we have the power to change all of this. As we start to move into more of a quantum mindset, about, they call it the observer effect, but it's really the creator effect. We are incredibly the masters of our own destiny, and it's up to us where we want to take this.
And that's what I've been getting from the people that I interview and talk to in this consciousness movement field. And so many people, it seems like the Illuminati or the powers that be that are in control are getting us to focus on fear and separation. But when we go into this loving oneness and connection, is that we are the creator being in, an aspect or an emanation, then our thoughts are deeds, and we re-empower ourselves and we move past victims into co-creating something that works for humanity and all beings.
Well, I think it's interesting to identify with the others that we think are oppressing us and see which parts of ourselves resonate with that and see what the needs of those parts are and to see if we can bridge the gap so it isn't them versus us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, we're all part of the same consciousness. And, we just need to align under a common purpose to take humanity to the next level of our existence. Now, around the world, in small patches, we've been given all the tools that we need to transform this. And many years ago, when I first joined the Michael Newton Institute, and we sat in a board meeting, and I piped up and said, how do we change humanity through this work? And I said, how do we do a Life Between Lives session for every politician and every CEO on the planet? And that would bring that'd bring about profound change. They need to have that experience in expanded consciousness in order to understand that there's so much more than what we have. I think it was Einstein himself that said, you can't solve a problem if you remain in the same consciousness that created it. And that's where we're at.
Right, so
can we turn Mr. Abbott into Jimmy Carter?
Anything could help, really, Dr. Sasha.
Well, that's a great say, and I wonder if there is some way we could actually do this on a quantum level. Are we truly connected, like to a morphogenic field, and our thoughts are deeds, and as we change ourselves, do we change the collective? Is some of that in action from your work?
Well, I really feel that's the case, and the power of as we move beyond Michael's work and into the quantum consciousness work, there's a conversation that allows that to expand even further. But first of all, morphic fields. I'm a big believer in morphic fields. Rupert Sheldrake's work and others like him, who talked about that. That if you look at the collective of all we are, then there's a morphic resonance between, within a particular species or within a particular group. And I'm a big believer in that. And I'm sure that you've both heard of the Maharishi effect. I mean, this is just absolute, scientific, quantifiable data that says, a small number of people have the, the opportunity to change the whole world. And I think it was Greg Braden's work in the Divine Matrix where he talked about the square root of 1% is all it takes to kickstart change in consciousness.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the Maharishi effect, I think it was in Cincinnati, in a crime-ridden area, people started meditating and everything mellowed out and got way better. Crime went down, violence went down by people meditating on peace.
Yeah. Isn't that great? Wouldn't it be great if we had the same enthusiasm for mandatory meditation as they do for paying taxes?
Yeah, if you go to prison, you have to meditate every day for an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. The world would change overnight, I believe.
Right. Well, so you brought up that it would be great if we had a mandatory requirement for all of the politicians to go through this, this work. How do we get this work out to more people? 30,000 is a phenomenal number, but I'd like to see that be 30 million. Do you have any idea how we can create this process to get people accessing their other lives, other selves?
Well, so far as the LBL and the work that we're doing at the Newton Institute, we're doing a few things to extend that. And one of the things that we're doing is we've got a lot of therapists in the United States. We've got a number across Australia, some parts of Europe, but there's huge potential in some of the larger countries like India, for example. So we're starting to kick off this work in India. We've got one of our people presenting over there in another month's time. We're going to start to train LBL practitioners in India. We've started to train a few people in China as well. So as we target the areas with great numbers of people, and particularly India, which has a belief in reincarnation just as part of their cultural heritage, they believe in that sort of thing. This is where we can start to gain momentum more quickly. It's interesting in that we're taking this work back to the east from the west, which has often been the other way around when it comes to spiritual practices. So we're doing that. And the other thing that we did in the Newton Institute about 18 months, 2 years ago, was Michael's research of 7,000 cases. A lot of that work was done back in the 70s, the 80s, and even into the 90s. And it was time for us to update that. So we formed a whole new research department. And we're now been collecting cases. We've been looking at the trends that are starting to emerge from this work from our collective of practitioners. And we're about to publish a quarterly journal, which we're calling Stories of the Afterlife. And we're going to get that out and, send it out through things like Facebook and through our client bases for our individual practitioners to try and spread the word further about what's possible when we move into these expanded states of awareness. So everything we can do is good.
Yeah. What are some of the most profound stories that you've encountered about the afterlife? And what are people learning and discovering?
Well, it's hard to it's hard to narrow it down to a handful of stories, but I mean some that have made the biggest impressions on me, and it goes back into these new things that we're finding, but I've seen some incredible reframes on the human mindsets. For example, I've seen clients who've tragically had to deal with suicide of a loved one in this lifetime, and I've gone into sessions where it's been a reciprocation from another lifetime when that other partner had left early. So the act of suicide has actually cleared karma from another time and place, which is very different to some of the human mindsets we have around suicide. I've had a number of, if I move right to this new edge of things, I've had a number of clients incarnate into a unique consciousness here in human form, but are part of a group consciousness of an extraterrestrial culture, where the unique consciousness is not something that they have. They are always connected as a group, and they share consciousness as a collective type thought process or being. And they choose one aspect of that consciousness to incarnate here in human form. And I've heard many stories now of clients who are here to experience that on behalf of a group. So the memories of what they have in this incarnation are going back into a collective mind. So, we're seeing some fascinating trends in this work.
Wow, that's fascinating because I either read it in your book or another book that part of the experiment in coming here was to experience separation of self and not self so that we could experience actually even the potential of harming another, because on the other realms we're too close to each other. We cannot possibly do any harm when we're connected as one mind. So that was reasoning is to experiencing love and not love. The variations in the form. And somehow that polarity created the background for us to create the diversification that we have here on this 3D level of existence on Earth, because without these extreme things like war and death and murder and hunger and all these trials and tribulations, many things have been created to solve those problems. But now it's getting too dark, and it's like the perturbation needs to come in to restore balance because it's too perverse. I can't remember where I read that, but that's what I was getting. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we talk about the forgetting or the remembering that you're part of a collective. When those people that I've worked with who discovered during their LBL sessions that they're part of a collective, up until that time in their life, they had experienced that incredible loneliness, that loss of disconnection, and had not really been able to bond with others here in society. And until they had their LBL session, they then found that they were part of a collective in a very different way, and it brought them peace. But absolutely, I think that there's a build-up of energy that's happening here at the moment. It's like, I'm trying to think of a better analogy than the bursting of a pimple, but anyway, ultimately, I think everything's coming to a head, and I think we've seen some aspects of this with global financial crisis and war, and, we've seen a rush of these, lower energies that just manifest as materialism and power and all the things that hold us back from, taking our consciousness to the next level. I mean, it's time for us to look at those things and choose differently in how we think, act, and behave. But in order to do that, we need some information that shifts our consciousness. And that's the work that people like you and me and others like us are doing.
Well, I'm really struck by the grace of the holographic kind of universe. One of the things that I found when I was working with Roger Wilger, one of my teachers, is that several people would identify with a past life in the same hysterical individual, and so you're faced with the dilemma: are they lying or no? They're part of. They each resonate with a different subpersonality in the persons who they've identified with, and it's really. Roger used to explain it as the animus mundi, that or the Akashic records, that we're all everything, and we access those past lives that are most relevant to us with the scripts we're dealing with in this and other lives, the sanskaras.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a loss to the world Roger was a couple of years back. I loved his work so much. I mean, somebody who's trained as a Jungian analyst and becoming an expert in past life work, I mean, that's just the most beautiful blend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've been noticing a lot of people are converging on past lives on this kind of conscious level. It's coming forth into their psyche and affecting their lives, and a lot of people are identifying with, like, Jesus. I've met so many people that are Jesus lately. Have you encountered that in your work? And I don't judge them or criticize them. I just go, okay, tell me what it's like being Jesus. So, and I don't want to, say whether they're crazy or not crazy. Are you finding people that identify with, well-known people of former incarnations?
Well, Michael Newton often jokes about the 3 Marilyn Monroes he had in his career.
I know Marilyn Monroe as well, and she gave a very vivid description of how she was murdered.
Wow.
She said it was Teddy Kennedy. He said, no, I can say it. She said, Teddy, please go over my head. Okay.
Well, who knows? Maybe some of this information is held in the collective consciousness. So, the famous people thing is an interesting one for us. I mean, everybody wants to be Cleopatra or, that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think we sometimes archetype, some of these things as a way to help us integrate them as well. And, a lot of people go back into, maybe it is biblical times with Jesus, and, they might have experienced some aspects of him. And, we are very much permeated in our consciousness by lots of stories that we've heard growing up. I once had a past life regression for a man who went back to when he was a small boy in the temple. and he was hiding under a table when a man came in and pushed all the tables over. And that's, of course, a Bible story when Jesus threw the money collectors out of the synagogue. So, and he went back and he experienced someone coming in and turning all the tables over, and he was a small child and he was frightened and hiding under one of those tables. So, he felt that maybe he had witnessed that story, and ultimately, the question becomes, what did he get out of it? And how did we helped him to release fear that was manifesting in his current lifetime. And, the past life aspect was another layer of that as we dropped deeper into his consciousness. And whether or not that experience was true, I guess it doesn't matter as long as he got the healing that he needed that day.
Right, and I'm thinking on the lines of if this is an archetypal memory that is a thread through the entire consciousness of humanity, that people can access those stories and they bring them into their reality as if they are their own. And is that any less real than any other memory? That's what I'm wondering. What do you think, Seth?
Well, I think when you imagine something, where do you get the images that you imagine? It's and are you creating them? That's the other sense. When I say to a person who's stuck, well, make something up. Well, where is up when they make it? It's almost always valid, and it will lead them to deeper and deeper things if you pursue it.
Yeah, that just gives them the confidence to proceed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some beautiful things that are happening, and I go back again to the timing of how this expanded consciousness type work is arriving for humanity now. And, I think it's time for us to be able to integrate some of this so that we can facilitate the change in our daily lives that bring a new consciousness. And as a result of that, I think that, when we take people across into an afterlife type scenario, they often see a guide and they'll say, oh, Jesus has come to meet me. And that helps us understand that perhaps there's some religious connotations that are coming in here, and we'll gently challenge some of that. And client might say, oh, no, it's just my guide, but he's appearing as a Jesus-type figure so that I can recognize him as my teacher. Mm-hmm. And so the spiritual beings from the other side will sometimes adapt into these archetypes as a way to allow our human understanding to integrate the information we're being offered. So, ultimately
when you tell stories, are you getting a greater picture of what really occurred here on the Earth? Are you able to reconstruct history on a more accurate level than perhaps we're being given by our lovely governments of the planet?
Okay. Yeah. Well, history is recorded, in a way that really expresses the opinion of people who came a long time afterwards.
Right.
And we do often find that we have historical data that's offered to us that is very different. Sometimes we'll go back to the ancient cultures, and they'll have interactions with aliens, and it's a bit more of an Eric von Daniken scenario than an archaeological one. So, if you look at his work with ancient cultures, Chariots of the Gods, etc., from many years back, Eric was down here in Australia recently, and I had the chance to hear him present. And the work that he's doing out of the ancient scriptures and the Book of Enoch, etc., just make absolute, complete common sense, more so than recorded history. So,
right.
Yeah,
so it would be to compile these 30,000 cases, perhaps into a series of books, and maybe if you get stories about certain historical periods, to see how they correlate, so we might have a more accurate idea of things like this, the extraterrestrial ancient aliens interaction with humanity. That's one of our specialties, is the Anunnaki and how they were interacting with humanity. But we have a lot of spaces in the history, a lot of blank spots because the recovered information is minimal compared to what actually occurred.
Yeah, and we'll absolutely,
Go ahead.
and we'll have clients who will go back into the distant past as we see it, the distant past into technologically advanced civilizations. And a lot of people say, oh, this must be Atlantis or something like that. Sometimes it might be a civilization on another planet, perhaps one that was here. But I remember doing some work some years ago with cancer, and I had a friend who was struggling with cancer, and I'd had 3 clients go back to what looked like Atlantean days. So I got them all back in and did some research. And I asked them, how did you heal? How did you do healing work back then? And basically it was all done with crystals, and people would be taken and they would be laying in a crystal room for a period of time. And by a combination of the crystal room and various colours, they were healed. Now, I had 3 separate and independent reports about this work, and so I couldn't resist, and I asked, well, how did you cure cancer in this lifetime? And the answer was typical. 2 of them gave me identical answers, and they said, well, we never had cancer. Cancer is a modern disease and is a vibrational disorder of the human body. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So some of these diseases are modern and introduced by our pollutants and our change in vibratory frequency. So that's fascinating. Yeah. What more did they say about that? So they didn't have to heal it, so they weren't offering cures for it, but are you able to, track down the history of cancer and when it really started showing up on the planet? And
I see no reason. I see no reason why we couldn't. And I do, having worked with a number of cancer cases over the years now, I simply believe that it is a physical manifestation of a vibrational disorder that's, you can link this back into a change in the brain chemistry. You can link that back to trauma. You can link that back to belief systems as per Bruce Lipton's work. I mean, you can link this back in lots of different ways. But I think that the cancer has a source that is not in the physical. It's something more of a vibrational nature.
So if somebody comes to you and they have cancer, are you able to regress them to an incarnation or an aspect of their existence that they can actually find the cure for what's making them feel at ease?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'll do with somebody who's working with cancer. First of all, I'd start to look for a trauma that was 12 months, 18 months prior to the cancer manifesting, because that's really the amount of time it takes to manifest in the body following a trauma. There's a really good piece of work by a guy by the name of Reincarnation, who was a German oncologist. He's very much not supported by the traditional medical community, which in my mind gives him even more credibility. But but ultimately he did an enormous amount of work tracking the different traumas to the different types of cancers. So sometimes I'll start there. Under the hypnoenergetics modality that I created some years ago, we had a process called psychoanatomy, where we actually move in, and it's typical of many different types of processes that are similar. We actually talk to the cancer, find out how it's feeling. You give it consciousness and allow it to tell its story, why it's there, what's the message that it's bringing, and once that message is received, does it still need to stay? Because basically cancer is body talk. Mm-hmm. Now, another layer behind that, of course, may be, is there any traumas that go back even further? Is there something back in other lifetimes? So you can test it for past life connections, and ultimately in the life between lives state, you can take somebody through at the end of one of those past lives and say, was it a decision that you took before you came into this lifetime to bring cancer or to manifest cancer at a certain time as part of your purpose in this lifetime for the learning it would bring to you and others around you? And that too can be explored in the in-between. So by the time you tackle cancer from those...
What are some of the reasons that people decide to experience cancer in their lifetime?
Well, as you probably know, when cancer manifests for somebody, it ripples out from them into all of the people that are close to them, and the journey that group take together is one of sometimes great tragedy and sadness, but ultimately about powerful healing if they're able to move through it. There's something there about if somebody is to leave, then earlier in life than they would have otherwise, then what is the ripple effect that empowers others or allows others the sacred journey through a grieving process? Some people who've lost a relative in an earlier time than you would think they should go sometimes turn to spirituality and have their own awakening as a result of it. So, I've seen big, one case that comes to mind was not so much cancer, but was suicide. And I worked with a lady who lost her son to suicide, and he threw himself off a balcony in front of her, and she had to watch, and it was a terrible experience for her. But ultimately, in the deeper states of work that I did with her, he came through to her. As she was in the in-between, his soul came to tell her, you really, really, really wanted to wake up. And after a number of lifetimes, this was the only way that we worked out together that you would awaken, in that the loss of me as your son would take you on a spiritual search for greater meaning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Any questions for us? Okay. What else I know there's a lot of stuff on quantum consciousness, and we probably would hold that back until the second hour, unless you want to start moving into that.
We can hold that back. I mean, ultimately, if we continue just with the life between lives work just for a moment, I mean, there's something that is really, really powerful in this work, in that, this is one of these modalities that's a calling. And, if Michael wanted to summarize what it was, I mean, there's some things that he writes to us from time to time. He's now wonderfully retired at, in his 80s, and he lives a very quiet life and leaves the rest of it up to the people who are carrying on his work. But basically, what he's always wanted to do through LBL was to pledge a new way of enlightenment that springs from the mind of each individual, regardless of their prior institutional belief system. Now, he found with those 7,000 clients that everybody comes from the same place and everyone goes back to the same place. So how is that not oneness and unity for humanity? And these feelings of separation and competition and fear that we have here in humanity, I mean, we just transcend all of that through the LBL work. I'm just trying to remember a beautiful quote that Michael offered me just a few months back. He talked about the spiritual realm. He talked about the human mindsets about heaven versus, the spiritual realm as our true home. And he talked about, here in human form, we behave like heaven is something that you have to earn rather than somewhere where you truly belong already. And that's where I think the religions fall a little bit short of the empowerment and the enlightenment of us in human form.
When I was reading the information, there was something about the souls tend to go to a certain level, but they don't go beyond. It's almost like there's a lid to where you can go on that side of the, it's like a two-sided coin, right? We have heaven and earth. Are people going beyond that barrier now and coming back to explain?
Do you mean more near-death experiences, Janet?
No, I'm talking about, as I remember from the book said, there was even like, you can only go so far in the levels. There's levels of existence. Some people say we have 13 levels of dimensions that we as souls can reside in, beside this bardo or this heaven realm. Anyway, I remember in the books, and I'll have to go back and find it. If you don't remember, that's fine. But it seemed like there was you could only go so far in that level, and there was a place that souls could go once they advanced and they had learned, but no one knew where they went from there. You remember that information? Have you
there's a little bit of that in Michael's books, in that when you reach a certain level in the development of your soul, you no longer need to return. Now, we're of course, learning in the physical form is only one way in which we can allow our soul to evolve. But there's so many other ways in which we can as well. So, other planes of existence, other projects, other parts of a multi-dimensional universe. I mean, it's really that, we are such a tiny grain of sand on a whole beach that, all of these opportunities are available to us. Rather than have the levels, Michael's work was more along the lines of, you get to a point where you don't have to come back, but I believe that some souls are choosing to come back to be part of this shift that we're currently experiencing. And I think those people are, those are the souls that really want to make a difference here in human form. And a lot of the souls with the off-world experiences, they come back as well. This is a pretty tough gig for them in these heavy earth bodies. It's like, it's like you and I walking around in a spacesuit when we don't need to.
Just another one of my teachers, her name is Angeles Arian. She's a Basque shaman and a professor of psychology as well. But what she says in a way that everything is perfectly the way it is supposed to be. Even the travail that we are experiencing are all part of the universal mind, and it couldn't be any other way because that's how it is, and it's perfect. And that's an interesting concept, that everything's there for our learning and our evolution, and it's all in the mind of the all, in the creator of all. Could you relate to that?
Absolutely. Once we drop our belief in separation, once we drop our belief in an individual consciousness and we realize that we are all connected, then all of that's made available to us. I really believe that.
What about the souls that we report that are ghosts and they are trapped in the bardo between this realm and the other? Is that something that's real, that's actually going on, or what do you find there?
Yeah, we see, sometimes we get a sense of souls that don't cross over properly, and sometimes they need some help to get home, and sometimes souls forget their light if they die in tragic circumstances. And I remember many years ago on a Life Between Lives course in Europe, when I was one of the teaching staff over there, we needed to do a demonstration for the students, and I thought, I was working with my buddy Paula Rand, who's our Director of Education, and I thought, well, here's a great experience, a great chance for me to have a Life Between Lives session with one of the best in the world. So I volunteered and donated myself as the client for this big experience. And the interesting thing for me in that session is that I went to a past lifetime where I was executed for having killed the local abbot because he ordered the death of somebody who was dear to me. And I was so shocked and so guilt-ridden by the experience of killing a man of the clergy that I hung around in the town square watching my hung, drawn, and quartered remains rot for about 3 weeks or so before I was ready to cross over.
Wow.
So I suppose I could claim to have been a ghost at one stage, just hanging around there and just watching it. And I won't give you too many of the visuals because these were grisly times. But yeah. Absolutely. Once we move out of the body and we lose our perspective of time in particular, if we move into that lower vibration that permeates our individual consciousness, then sometimes we can get stuck.
When I was working with Roger, we had a number of people that were blown up or vaporized, and they didn't know they were dead, and in the hypnoregression, they picked up the pieces, they constructed a body. If they were of American Indian descent, they gave it a burial in the etheric realm, but they didn't know they were dead.
Yeah.
Or what happened to them. They didn't realize that. Janet even had a case like that with Jim.
Oh, yeah. I've worked with the dead that were stuck, so, and I didn't do it, particularly they just came to me, so I had a lot of that going on. We're going to be going to the break. Right now. We'll be back in 3 minutes. 3 minutes, everybody.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And we are talking to Peter Smith, who is the president of the Michael Newton Institute. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over and make a donation. We are running behind. We have not met our quota for this month yet, and we really need you to go over, please, and donate $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you can donate, $100. Your donations would be greatly appreciated because we really need them to keep the show up and running and to bring all these wonderful programs to you. So thank you very much for going over and taking the time to make your donation today. We greatly appreciate your donation. So we had a very exciting first hour with Peter Smith. What would you like to say, Sasha, before we bring back Peter?
Put a nickel in the drum. Save another drunken buck. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, start the show.
Let's go. I'm really ready to learn more.
Okay, Peter, we're going to shift into your work on quantum consciousness. What is quantum consciousness and the quantum consciousness experience? If you could explain that to our listeners.
Happy to, Janet. And following on from all of the expanded states of awareness work that I've done over the years, inevitably we have to move into a quantum mindset. I mean, it's just permeating us from every direction these days. And what I love about quantum physics is that it is pretty much the science of possibility. And if we take the science of possibility and we blend it with consciousness, then we have something that we can embark upon that takes the human mindsets with us and uses some of the aspects of quantum physics, if you like, as a springboard into the expanded states of awareness. So we get the best of both worlds. We get the comfort of the mind being able to be fertilized by science, but then not restricted because we move into our expanded states of awareness. So, I mean, quantum consciousness itself is about, who are we when we are out there in the universe in a way that completely releases us from the restrictions of human form. And this is, we've all dabbled, as you have as well over the years, in different expanded states of awareness. But if we can understand at our deeper level about the possibilities we hold within our subatomic particles, and there's so many different aspects of science coming through and confirming this, we're set free to experience our personal universe in every level of consciousness that we can imagine, and even more than that. So quantum consciousness is really about taking us wherever we need to go in our personal universe to learn whatever we need to and be that portal out into these other realms.
Okay, so let's break it down. I know you have this YouTube, and I was going to listen to it one more time, on the quantum consciousness experience. What are the different aspects before something like that?
Well, the quantum consciousness experience involves three things. First of all, we need to change the present consciousness. We need to help our subatomic particles remember that they are full of potentials and opportunities. And these are the other realms that follow once we activate that. Then we take four basic principles of quantum physics, the observer effect, non-locality, entanglement, and the holographic universe itself, and we take those into expanded states of awareness. And let me talk about the transition that we go through. First of all, we take our clients into an expanded state where we help them remember at the subatomic level that they are quantum beings, that they are full of all of the possibilities and can be anywhere in their personal universe that they need to be. So when we take the observer effect, and everybody's heard of the double slit experiment, and when they fired the electrons through the metal plates, it showed an interference pattern of whether it was, sometimes as a particle, sometimes as a wave, sometimes a connection of both. But we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that our consciousness interferes with an experiment, and we see what we expect to see. Now, the power of that, of course, means that we can manifest anything that we want to. And so the observer effect, we call it in quantum consciousness, we call it the creator effect, because we are completely the masters of our own destiny, and we can create whatever we want to create within our personal universe. If we look at non-locality, and in a quantum way, non-locality means that particles exist in the superposition, if you like, until such time as they're observed, and then they collapse the wave structure, and it moves into a particular scenario that we then observe. But if we look at non-locality in that those subatomic particles can be anywhere that they need to be, we call this in quantum consciousness the every-awareness. We look at the fact that we can exist anywhere we want to in our personal universe, whether it be alternate realities, whether it be interdimensional consciousness, and we'll talk more about those realms as this unfolds in a little while. Everybody knows about quantum entanglement. Einstein once called this spooky action at a distance. So we are entangled with the world around us, the consciousness of who we are entangled with. We have a term in quantum consciousness that's about entanglement. For example, I'm sitting here as my 51-year-old, and I'm still wonderfully entangled with my 5-year-old. I'm entangled with my 60-year-old, who provides advice and support to me. Once we move outside of time and space and we surrender our normal state of being into a quantum mindset, we are absolutely outside of time and space, and we can connect with any of these other selves. I'm talking about meeting ourselves in alternate realities, in parallel lives, which we still call, past lives when we look at it from a linear time frame. But if we remove time and space, then those lifetimes are still unfolding in the same time as we are. And then if we move into the last component of holographic healing, we can send healing across our personal universe to all of those other selves, to all times in Earth's history where our consciousness still resides in those other bodies. And we can start to raise the darkness that's been building up on this planet for millennia. We can actually send healing back in time. And in a holographic way, we can then expand that across timelines and across space in ways that we couldn't do before we had the quantum mindset.
Cool.
Wow.
Oh, I dig it.
So that's sort of
Okay.
that's 3 years of history in and research in the space of about 2 minutes.
Wow. It sounds right on. That's beautiful.
Well, I think I need to. I'm getting this abstractly, and on this. I need to integrate this information. So let's break it down and go over that again. Wow. I heard a term called quantum leaping from somebody else that was putting it out there for a while, and it seemed to be talking about going into your other aspects. Like his example was, I leapt into a universe where my artist was out, and I was a great artist, and then I was a singer and a musician. And just because I accessed that, he said at 80 years of age, I started painting paintings that were, selling for lots of money, and composing and playing instruments I never knew I could before. Is that on the line of what one can do with your quantum consciousness?
Well, I've got a slightly different view of the alternate realities that you might describe there. Certainly, we can always search our parallel lives for lifetimes when we've done great musical things, or we've been a courageous warrior. Perhaps we've been a wonderful healer. I feel that in our personal universe, all that is there. And when we started to do this work, we had to work out, how does an alternate reality form? And I've seen a lot of quantum leaping type experiences and studied a little bit of that work. And I always wondered about the difference between creative visualization. There's always a wonderful way for us to change our consciousness and bring something in, or whether we were accessing an alternate reality. So we had to go back and we had to, I guess, get information about how does an alternate reality form. So the theories that we came up with, and this links back into the Life Between Lives work of Michael Newton as well. Before we come here, we map our lives out for us, according to the research that we've done at the Newton Institute, Michael's 7,000 case studies and others that have happened. So we know that a soul will actually split their energy in the interest of learning. We know this from a couple of different ways. We know this because part of our soul energy remains in the spiritual realm when we incarnate. And when we do LBL work, we recombine those energies and bring them together. There's also been cases where people have undertaken incarnations in Earth's linear time in unison. And I once had a lady who said, I said to her, as we often did in LBL, I said, how much of your energy have you brought into this body? And she said 40%. And I said, so there's 60% back in the spiritual realm. And she says, no, 20%. And this was a client in the deep superconscious state of the theta brainwave patterns. And of course, I'm running the numbers on that, and I've come up 40% short. So I said to her, where's the other 40%? And she said, it's in China. And I said, what's it doing in China? She said, working in an office. And I said, well, does that mean, because this is quite rare, but it does happen that souls will incarnate in unison in two different bodies. And I said, will you two ever meet? And she said, well, there'd be no point because I split my energy into these two different bodies so that I could cover more ground and learn more. So if we take that simple principle into this as well, the hypothesis that we have for alternate realities is that if a soul wants to go in two directions in a life-changing decision that brings knowing and awareness and learning from those two lifetimes, the alternate reality will unfold but only in collaboration with the soul. Now, let me something that I said in the book, Quantum Consciousness, Expanding Your Personal Universe. I bring in this analogy of toast. Now, if I get out of bed in the morning and I decide to have jelly on my toast, or if I decide to have peanut butter on my toast, and they're separate, does that mean that I create two alternate realities to do with toast? Now, if we pause and look at that from the soul's perspective, we need to ask, would a soul split its energy and go into two alternate realities just on the basis of a different piece of toast? And under what we've learned through LBL work, we'd have to say no. So my hypothesis in this work of how an alternate reality forms is that it does it in conjunction with the soul consenting to learn in two different directions.
Wow. I had a very strange experience where I had a young lover, and then I said, what in the world was that? I just kind of asked the question to the universe.
Yeah.
And the universe said, that was another self of yours. You were incarnated at the same time, and you just made love with your other self. It was like the woman who had her other self in China. It wasn't like a twin flame or a soulmate. It was another variation of yourself. And I dismissed that like, oh, that's crazy. But then I encountered similar stories in the Michael Newton books, and I just wondered if anybody encountered their alternative self and had them as a lover.
Yeah. I haven't seen any examples, but of course you've got there's the quite well-known twin flame phenomenon, which talks about the fact of soul energies separating and then rejoining. So there's that as a theory that's out there. I guess what I've found with this work is that the further we can spread our energy to learn, the more we'll do it. But ultimately, it becomes the free will at the level of the soul in order to do so. But the veil between all of these different realms and realities is becoming quite thin. So, yeah, I'm not surprised to hear your story, Janet, at all. And I guess the beauty of the alternate realities that we can access, and I'll tell you a story in a moment about one of them. The beauty of the soul splitting its energy to go into these two alternate realities is under the philosophy of entanglement, because these two realities have come from the same subatomic particles before they split. They are intricately entangled and therefore can be accessed even more easily than parallel lives, or what we might have known as past lives. And once we adopt a quantum mindset that these aspects of ourselves exist, and we create an energetic environment where we can step into them, they come forward really easily and really readily. Let me offer you an example. Okay. In one of the cases from the book, I worked with a lady who was absolutely, completely riddled by guilt. And the reason that she was riddled by guilt was that when she was due to get married in her early 20s, all the families were gathering for this big wedding, but as sometimes happens in human form, she was in love with somebody else. So she had to make a decision. Do I continue to go through with that wedding, or do I run away with the man who I really love? Now, she chose to run away, and it sounds a bit like an old movie, doesn't it? But she ran away. So Claire, this lady's name is, Claire chose to run away backpacking with her true love. Now, they ultimately got married. They had two beautiful sons who are now grown men. And 30 years later, she is still riddled by guilt, by having left this other fellow at the altar, and, of course, all the family implications and all of that as well. So she carried this guilt for 30 odd years. So she was at one of our workshops, and she became the demonstration in front of a group of 20 people. And we took her to meet her other self who went through with the wedding. And we've got there's a whole technique that we use to access that. But she came face to face in this place of in between the realms. And this lady came forward and she was bent over, she was depressed, she was unhappy, and she was old before her time. And the interactions of the two of them were profound. She found in that moment that she had made the right decision. She found that she had taken the courageous path, and there were two wonderful men on this planet who were her sons, who never would have been born had she gone with that other husband. And ultimately, at the end of the day, she released her guilt almost instantaneously, and it just evolved. But she was able to help that other her, because in this alternate reality work, we always set the intention to raise the vibration of both. So she was able to introduce this other her to the sons that she never had. And this lady was able to release her depression and find absolute hope in the fact that there was another aspect of her who lived on differently in another place, and she was able to draw on her energy to heal. Now, both these ladies benefited from the experience, and 3 weeks later, Claire wrote to me and she said, I've carried guilt for 30 years, but it's 3 weeks since we had the workshop, and I just can't find any trace of it.
Beautiful.
Beautiful story. I wondered, as you were saying that, is there's a way for her to access the husband she left at the altar and see how his life turned out? Was he better off that they had married?
Well, that's possible too. I mean, ultimately, the theory of this is that she has access to everything in her personal universe. So it's really about her finding within her personal universe everything she needs to be the best that she can possibly be. On occasion, we do have an interaction with another person that has been part of their history. But basically, it's about everybody remembering that they already have whatever they need. So it's more about the access of the other selves.
Wow. Okay, so continue.
Yeah. So if we talk about the quantum conscious, let me run you through the quantum consciousness experience, and that'll give you an idea of the flow out across the realms that we visit. And there's a number of realms that we set up. We activate the quantum potentials in the client. We bring to them the quantum mindset, and then we start to move out through the quantum realms. And first of all, there's a whole series of conditioning that we do. This work, of course, works better for people who've got experience in expanded states. But as we move out into what we call the stored consciousness, right, we change the perspective of that present consciousness. And we move out through the stored consciousness. And the stored consciousness is all that we are in this timeline. And I mentioned earlier that here I am at 51, but I've got this wonderful relationship with my 60-year-old. And he often pops through and offers a word of wisdom in my ear, and helps me with a big decision that I'm making in life, because he's already there. He's already got the benefit of hindsight, which he can then offer me in a space of timelessness. And let me give an example of that. I was moving to a new clinic, and I was offered some rooms at one of the clinics, and I was about to take those rooms, and a voice in my ear said, "No, don't take these rooms." And he told me about an event that would happen at that clinic that would ultimately, be detrimental to this work that we're doing. So, I follow his advice. He tells me all of these things. When I started to get into the quantum consciousness work, of course, we're all short of time. And I didn't know whether I was meant to, obviously I still wanted to lead the Michael Newton Institute for Michael. But then I had my Institute of Hypnoenergetics, I had the quantum work happening, and I had a conversation with my 55-year-old who tried to do it all. And then from this other reality, the 60-year-old, he came to me and he said, the 55-year-old had told me that he was stressed, And he had not been able to do all of the work that he needed to. He was disenchanted. He was low in energy. He'd had all of these, issues from trying to do too many things. And then my 60-year-old came through and he put a hand on my shoulder and he said, let it go. Just offer that work to somebody that you trust and do the other work, because this is where your purpose lies and this is where the power of the work truly lies. So the next day I rang a friend of mine who I'd been co-teaching with and I said, the Institute of Hypnoenergetics is yours now. And I gave it to her and I got on with this new work. So that was my 6-year-old. He came through in my stored consciousness, because that's the timeline of who I am. So that all, yeah. So once we move past stored consciousness, we send a ripple of healing through all of my other selves at every age that I am still. Then I move into the alternate consciousness, and any other alternate me's that want to come forward in the interest of wisdom or in the interest of healing can come forward. And I've had a number of these come through before. Obviously, my partner, Melina, and I have been the crash test dummies until we trained a range of other therapists to actually do this work. We've now got about a dozen people who are active in practice doing this work and fitting in more case studies as they come. And, in the early days, in my alternate consciousness, I met a number of other me who were, had wisdom to share, who had healing that they needed. And, there was one part of me that was completely depressed and disenchanted with life. There was another me who stayed in, I once had a corporate part to my life. The first 20 years of my working life was spent in corporate. There was another me that stayed there and had a heart attack on a train and died at 47. And I saw what happened to him. And I saw the impact on my loved ones as a result of that. So, what you get from an experience like that is, wow, it's great that I left that world. So, the alternate realm, alternate consciousness, we move out through there as well. Again, collecting the wisdom, collecting the healing. Parallel consciousness, of course, this is past lives that are no longer in time and space. And this is a very powerful realm, because as I mentioned before, we can call forward all of our other selves, from other times in Earth's history. Call all those who have faced fear, all those who have, fallen foul of the authorities of the day, all of those who have, wanted to achieve great things but were never able to. We call them forward and we release the boundaries and the barriers that have held them back, and we send them back across time and space to make a difference to the history of this world. Now, as we move out into this parallel consciousness, of course, all of those other selves that come from other times and places, they have their own alternates. They have their own stored consciousness. They move back into their present consciousness back there. So the holographic healing effect of this across the history of our planet can be profound. And we create that through our own creator effect, and we send that ripple of healing out. So by this stage, all of those parallel aspects of ourselves have come forward. We've worked with them as we need to. And then we move into interdimensional consciousness. Now, this realm is, we further fertilize the present consciousness as we move into this realm through the words that we offer. And we help them to remember what it's like to be outside of this physical body in human form. And we have people that go to lifetimes of being, lights just flashing through the universe, of different types of species on other planets. There was one case that comes to mind was a lady who visited a lifetime as being an underwater creature, a bit like a giant squid. But she was a satellite that kept all the species on that planet communicating with each other. She was like a receptor and a translator, like a living satellite dish that collected all the information and dispersed it across all the species. She actually shared the consciousness with all species on that planet. Now this was a lady who came with the question of wondering whether she should have a family or not, whether she'd be able to cope with it. once she was shown a lifetime of doing this sort of thing for all manner of life on that planet, she certainly changed her perspective. Wow. Now, once we've moved through this interdimensional consciousness and we expand further out into the eternal consciousness of who we really are, back into this expanded state of being beyond time and space, beyond physical incarnations, beyond interdimensional aspects of ourselves that we may have visited as well. We just rest there quietly in the space of that, and then, as a final aspect of that journey, we blend that still unique consciousness with the consciousness of all there is, so they can feel what it's like to be part of the fabric of the cosmos. And of course, then we've got to try and get them back.
Yeah.
So we bring them back into that forever changed present consciousness with this new aspect of life. We help them to understand the lessons that they've had on that journey out through the realms of consciousness. We bring them back and we allow them to integrate and to absorb this new information in a way that just brings acceptance. And what we're finding a lot with the integration is, because we've adopted the quantum mindset to start with, help them to understand that they are quantum beings full of all of these potentials, we're not getting the same level of, did I make that up, or did I was I really a gladiator in a previous life? Because we've fertilized that present consciousness before we leave, we've found that we're getting a greater level of acceptance once people return from these journeys.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, how long does this process take? Is this
usually
hours,
somewhere.
days?
Yeah. Usually between 2 and 3 hours.
Wow.
Once we invoke the 4 aspects of quantum consciousness that I mentioned earlier, we talk about the creator effect, every-awareness, entanglement, holographic healing. We're not looking at really deep, long trance-type sessions. We're establishing a state of quantum expanded states quite quickly. And ultimately, there's a wonderful conversation that, for setting of intention and the fertilization of the conscious mind and all of those things that happen initially. All of that is done as part of it. But then, we're ready to travel reasonably quickly after we've spent half an hour, 45 minutes setting objectives, perhaps challenging some of the human views that are there. But once somebody's activated, they actually move through these realms in a timeless way, but more quickly than what we would normally think.
You find that everybody can do this, or there's some that are resistant? Does it help if they've already done past life regression?
It's always a help to have undertaken altered states work before, whether it's trance states, meditation, as you say, any of that. But ultimately, we're not striking the human trauma. Like, if the whole objective of this work is to transcend the heavy energy in human form. And we're finding that as a result, the energy of these sessions, and this is therapists that we're training in this work, it's resulted in much lighter sessions than traditional therapies. It's like we're moving it up, and as we adopt that quantum mindset at the start, we're moving into an energy that just allows this travel to happen, quite easily in regard to other work they may have done before.
Well, do you have something to say?
Oh, yeah, just that I find resistance to be really useful, and I like to talk to the part that's resisting and find out its story and what it really needs, and I like resistance. I can work with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I bet
absolutely.
You do too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, it's usually just an aspect of themselves trying to look after them, Sasha, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they feel more comfortable, and when they, ultimately people who come for this work, they're drawn to the work because of that state of readiness that they already hold within their energy field. So if we were to feel some sort of resistance emerging, we'd probably do something more traditional first up as a way to help that aspect of themselves who's a bit nervous about where it might go, in order for them to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, I was going to say something, I forgot what it was. So these people that are accessing this quantum level, they're, at least, see if I'm getting this right, so they're understanding more of their role in totality, in existence. I guess when you get to this level, you begin to see beyond victim and victimizer, but more of a view of the entire system or the divine play, Leela of the cosmos that was created in order to have experiences.
I guess one of the things that we love to ask when they get out into these outer realms is, how does this fit with your purpose? How does this serve you in terms of, what's the ripple of healing that you want to send to humanity while you're there? What is it? And we're working on the basis that, we all see ourselves as one unique aspect of consciousness who is here contributing to the collective consciousness of humanity. But the beauty of this personal universe is that they are one aspect of themselves in their present consciousness in an almost limited personal universe, and they have the power of every time they've been in another time and place in their parallel realms. Every decision they've ever made is there within their grasp as their alternate consciousness. Every time they've ever been in an interdimensional life form or other dimension, all of that is available to them. Now, to raise the vibration of somebody's personal universe, what that does is that has the aspects of sending a ripple effect through all of the other realms of consciousness in which their unique consciousness resides. So it's like the healing and the exploring that we're doing has exponential application to somebody's journey. And, we're really going out there with this stuff, and we're really sending a huge ripple of consciousness out through the holographic universe into the fabric of the cosmos. Now, when somebody has the opportunity to do that, it's really hard for you to see yourself as just Joe Citizen on his way to the office on Monday morning. And that's something that really helps humanity.
You go down all the roads not taken as well as the ones taken.
Absolutely.
Do some people have trouble reintegrating back into their human self once they've expanded all the way to this level?
One of the things that we do, Janet, is we set up ongoing support from their other selves. And I guess my 60-year-old's a good example of that. When I did that session some time back, he's there and I can still tune into him and I can still tap into him and I might say to him, what do I do with this? And he might just say to me, what are you worried about that for? It's really not important in the scheme of things. So, it's not just don't sweat the small stuff. It's about the ongoing support and the connection back into the resources that we source in their personal universe that allows them to have ongoing connections. It's like we remain that portal. We still have to be grounded and we still have to go through life as we know it, but we go through it in a way that is forever changed. It's like, when I first came across LBL work many, many years ago with Michael's work, and I saw that, I then knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was a spiritual being having a human experience. And whilst I'm here to experience the humanness of that and the feelings and the sensations of being human and to deal with that in this tough physical earthly plane in which we reside, I lived my life from that day with another level of hope and inspiration, knowing that I was that spiritual being having the human experience and that, death was just a transition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. With this work, we're finding that, speaking from my own personal experience, I can say that I'm a representative of all that I am. And I'm here in this physical form, and I'm here as my 60-year-old, I'm here as my fun 5-year-old, I'm here as all of these other dimensions. I'm a portal to all realms of consciousness that reside in my personal universe, and I know fully and completely that I'm a quantum being, and I can access those resources as needed.
We've had several people this week that have come to us and said, I have discovered my reason for coming to the earth and why I chose to live here. Are you finding people discovering what is the purpose of coming here, what their purpose is? What is the
Look,
purpose
I think,
of this?
yeah.
Well, I think,
yeah. Why did we come? Was it such a good idea? Ultimately, I believe that we're here to raise the vibration of humanity. There's the fourth book in the Michael Newton series called Memories of the Afterlife, and it's written by 28 of our therapists from around the world, 32 of our therapists from around the world, and I've got a chapter in there. And what we were required to do was to go back to one of our LBL clients from the early days and find out what difference it had made in their life. Now, I went back and I interviewed a person who's, obviously his name was changed in the book, but he's a very well-known entertainer. He's a musician. And, over a cup of coffee, in a coffee shop one day when I was debriefing him some years later, and I said to him, what do you think of what you discovered in this expanded states work? And he said, he says, I now know that I came back here to make a difference to consciousness of humanity and to help evolve it. And that sounds just really enormous and really inspiring. He said, but isn't that why everybody came back? And he said it's both very large and very small at the same time. And I guess in those humble words, because this fellow, even though he's world famous, he's just a really humble guy, just doing his job. He says, I'm here to raise the vibration of humanity, and I chose music this time around to do it. That's what we're all here to do. And it doesn't mean that we have to have that huge perspective of I'm here to change the world. All we have to do is change our own world, because we're all part of the collective consciousness. So if we change our own world, then we change humanity just by doing that. If we change the world in a way that, if you look at our personal universe, if we look at how we can help all of our other selves evolve, then it greatly magnifies the contribution that we can make to our little corner of the universe here. And in a holographic universe, of course, as we raise the vibration of humanity here on Earth, we're actually healing the universe. This is our collective contribution to the fabric of the cosmos. This is something that has amazing, remarkable, and unique contribution, not just to ourselves, not just to humanity, but to all there is. And I really feel that's why we're having so much interest from, extraterrestrial races who are observing us. And I mean, it's clear that they are. I mean, we all know that UFO, disclosure is imminent. And there's just too much evidence there. I mean, people are just too smart these days. You can't hush this stuff up forever. I think they're benevolent beings who are helping us. I think there's our spiritual beings within us that are helping us. This is another aspect of that in our personal universe, is all of our other selves are on board with this joint agenda to evolve as we are as well. And I just think it's all heading in the right direction.
So if we are all here for the same purpose, what is the purpose of living lives on the earth?
Well, from a lot of the stuff that we've seen over the years, we know that this Earth school is a really tough one. And we know that it's a courageous act just to incarnate into the denseness and the heaviness of the energy of this planet and these bodies, but it's also about collective free will. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we've all seen beautiful parts of this world. There's amazing places that we can visit that have very special energy, and most of them are to do with nature and the natural phenomenon of this planet, rather than sort of the suburbs of our cities and that sort of stuff where we've come together to, huddle together for warmth and to form communities. But ultimately, why did we come here? We came here really to make a difference to ourselves, to evolve our consciousness. We talk about the veil that comes down, because if we learn something through this unknowing state in which we incarnate, then I don't know, maybe we get extra brownie points for starting over and solving it. But ultimately, it's all about...
I got a download or some information one time that we created this third-dimensional physicality, this dense level, to further diversify creation. We kept pushing it out to deeper and darker and denser levels, putting the continuum out of good, bad, light, dark, further and further, because the further it was put out, the more we had diversity created in this continuum. So something on that line, I'm not quite able to explain it, but I have an understanding that there is divine perfection in all that is happening, and from the human level, it seems so hurtful and painful sometimes, especially when we look at our world and so many people are homeless, are starving, are suffering, and dying of diseases, and it seems to be very extreme. Have you found any feedback from your people that you've regressed or work with and this other levels as to what's going on that it's so dark and extreme at this point in existence?
Well, we know from some of this deeper work that the greater the more difficult the journey, the greater the evolution. It's like the souls that come here and incarnate here, I believe, are the ones that are, really eager to progress from a difficult school. It's like you get, it's I don't know, they're probably doing university work somewhere, and this is another night school on top of it, where you take on additional studies just to try and make a difference and speed up your diploma. But ultimately, if I look at the number of interdimensional lives that I've seen people go to parallel lives on other planets, etc., this is a really difficult place, and I think it speeds up the evolution of people. I mean, out of the shadows comes the light. I mean, there's a great need for light on this planet. We simply have too many shadows, and the great challenge for us is to look deep within ourselves and to find the light that we all hold at the core of our being, and to shine it as brightly as we can. If we all do that, if we all expand our consciousness, we can wash away the shadows and the darkness that permeate this planet in different places. I really feel that, if we pull together on that, then that's really the collective purpose for which we all came here. But, if there wouldn't be courage if there wasn't fear. You've got to feel the fear first and then move into the courage. So maybe the shadows here are the activation of a greater consciousness. Maybe that's what we're all part of.
I agree. You guys keep pointing at me. The shadow has just energy, and once we own it, then we're energized and ready to ascend to the next level of consciousness.
I wonder if once we all come to a great global kumbaya and everything's peaceful, we'll decide at some point in the future to go into the theater and watch the horror movie again. Is this something that seems to be cyclical, that we, go into darkness and expand and grow and come into lightness and then go back into it again?
Well, interestingly, I've had probably, I would say 3 or 4 clients in the last couple of years, and I've asked the question when they've been deep in these expanded states, and I've said, they say they're here to help the consciousness of humanity evolve. And I said, have you ever done this before in other places? And I'm getting 2 types of replies. One is that, yes, I've done this before in other places a couple of times before. And so these are the truly courageous people, because they've come back for another round of this. And so that's one lot that I'm getting. And the other lot is saying, yeah, we've tried here before and failed.
Oh.
Now, whether that's...
It makes you wonder, are there souls that are like the Jesuses and Buddhas and, the other more evolved, conscious, enlightened beings that choose to come into the dark realms to... I guess they're not really allowed to rescue us per se, but they accelerate consciousness. Otherwise, we're kind of just drowning in our own darkness for far too long. So it's almost like they give us a shot of hope or enlightenment to. So will do that. They kind of come from the higher realms down to these lower realms to accelerate consciousness.
I really believe that there are some beautiful advanced souls that, avatars, whatever you want to call these souls. I mean, it's just a label, isn't it? But ultimately, it's about the unique consciousness vibration that they hold. Just by incarnating into a collective consciousness, they can help to shift it. And then ongoing, as their teachings become, part of the legacy that they leave for the generations that come after that, I think that can be a beautiful gift to a collective consciousness. I guess all the religions have at their core those beautiful themes around compassion and understanding and enlightenment. It's just that sometimes we go astray a little bit as we translate them into the day-to-day principles of what religions can be. But I think the purity of their intent is something that really does shift the collective consciousness.
So who are the trailblazers in consciousness work, in your opinion?
Well, we don't have to go too far back to see some of these heroes, and there's a lot of these people that are still active out there now. I look at the work of people like Lynn McTaggart, when she does all of those experiments. Her original book, The Field, was just great. She pulled together so many different things that were just so enlightening, and we're just following this whole path. Greg Braden, somebody that blends some of the ancient wisdom into the modern practicalities. His work he makes some of the complicated consciousness theories so understandable. I've always been a big fan of Bruce Lipton as well, ever since Bruce challenged the traditional view of the medical system, that we're not about disease, we're about dis-ease, which comes from our environment, which comes from the beliefs that we hold underneath it. I've been a big fan of him as well. Ultimately, one of the great books that Michael Newton put me in touch with as I started to research the quantum stuff was The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that's just that's a masterpiece of research from a guy that was more a writer and a researcher, and of course he had a lot of his own spiritual awakenings on the way through. But if you look at that, The Holographic Universe as being his final book, because he had novels and all sorts of things, but that book he wrote at 36, and I think he passed away at 37. So it's like it was job done. And
I think
that was
he
the purpose.
and he knew Whitley Strieber, who wrote Communion.
Okay.
Friends. It seems like they were accessing this quantum level, and I guess that's a good question. How does this tie in with the? I heard that you told me that you sat next to Mary Rodwell, who was also in Australia, and she works with experiencers and contactees, and they're accessing a lot of this information. Have you been able to connect the dots with her and correlate the experiencer information? Oh, also, Whitley Strieber said that when they were contacting on UFOs, sometimes the dead were there as well. So it seems like they're accessing the same realm. Do you have any information or anything on that?
Well, Mary Rodwell's a wonderful lady. She's done so much for experiences of ET contacts over the years. She's brought, a level of acceptance and normality to those people that, were perhaps shunned by others. So, her work's fantastic with ACERN and other places, and she's, she works a lot with, I think it's Edgar Mitchell, isn't it? The old astronaut that's,
Edgar Mitchell.
Yeah.
They're working with, which is a new organization of experiencers.
Yeah.
FREE, which stands for something I can't remember.
Yeah, that's it. Free. Yeah, that's it. What I love about Mary's work is that she's brought a connection into this that even by having some sort of an experience with an extraterrestrial consciousness, that in itself is an event that awakens a deeper consciousness within us anyway. So it's like when you come in touch with, when you become entangled, if you like, with that greater level of consciousness that that the ETs may provide, that activates us further back here in human form to either explore more or to allow other consciousness experiences to move through. It's like even that raises our vibration. And that's what I love about her work. Rather than, people back in the old days had an experience like that and they were shunned or told they were a little crazy, she's actually honouring them to that level that, what their experience is an activation of their consciousness to a greater level. I love that about her work.
Oh yeah, I'm a learning freak. Are you giving any trainings that I can go to, and therapists like me who want to practice and work with you? Are you doing anything that is available?
Yeah, we're doing what we call the quantum consciousness facilitator training, Sasha. And what we do is
that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Say some more.
Yeah. We're teaching people to do this work now. It was important a few years back that we trained a dozen people so that we could help with the research and get everything together for the book that's now been launched. But ultimately, we're certainly taking therapists who are already trained therapeutically, and we're training them in the quantum consciousness facilitator work. It's usually a 2-day workshop. We have them in Australia. We've got some. We had one in the US last year, over in North Carolina, and we've got some others that we're going to plan as the work unfolds. But it's normally a 2-day experience. We offer all the tools and the techniques. You both give and receive your own experience, both for alternate realities and for the quantum consciousness. We do some demonstrations, and then we embark on an accreditation process where we coach people over a period of some months as they submit case studies. And we're forming a great little network to take this work to the world with our accredited facilitator listing. And also we have gatherings of our therapists from time to time as well, both face-to-face and electronically. So, yeah, we're looking forward. This work's starting to gather momentum now. We're doing different ones in Australia, but of course we're at the bottom of the world here. But we're branching out back into the States again next year.
That's great. My Sasha's sister, my sister-in-law, is the head of the International Hypnosis Federation. So it'd be great to connect existing organizations and perhaps, there's no true altruism. I would love to see our planet, survive all this. And I think the quickening of using these techniques for planetary awakening will, ensure that our planet is here for us to come back in future incarnations in a world that is not a total dictatorial, dictatorship type reality, but one which is supportive of life and having happy and joyous lifetimes.
Absolutely.
I'd love to see this work maybe connected with other associations that already exist, accelerating the training. I'm sure there's more than enough work for everybody because there's 7.5 billion people.
Yeah.
We have about 3 minutes. What would you like to cover in the last 3 minutes before we are out of time? 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, if I could offer anything, somebody said to me one day, they said, how do I go about this? I've read your book. What should I do? I'd actually say to people, just explore as if your life depends upon it and be curious. Don't get caught in the systems. Don't get caught in the beliefs that hold us back. Be courageous enough to move outside the box you've been offered, because that's really what the education systems give us. It's really what society gives us. They give us a series of boxes through which to live our lives. So just look for other information and smash that box. But also to understand the ripple effect of what we offer to other people. Everything we do in our own personal consciousness actually reverberates out to the people that we love and the ones that we're entangled with. And if we all hold an intention for a better world, then collectively we've got to be more powerful than anyone believes. I really feel that we are remarkable in human form. It's just that we've forgotten. If we all remember that, the world will be a better place.
Awesome. And you're working on a new book, and what is that going to be about?
Yep. Yeah, the book just out, Quantum Consciousness, Expanding Your Personal Universe. We've just run a whole lot of copies off so we can get up to the Nexus conference in Queensland in Australia and launch it. So there'll be a formal launch in the months ahead. But it's available through the website instituteforquantumconsciousness.com. But it really chronicles this work. There's 15 case studies in there, a lot of the philosophies, the methodologies, even some of the experiences have been recorded in there where so people can find them and just find out more about what this work's about.
Excellent. And the other books that you were involved with, can you tell us what their titles are and what they encompass?
Yeah. My earlier book is Hypnoenergetics, The Four Dimensions. That's out there on Amazon, and of course, I'm always a great promoter of Michael's work with Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, Life Between Lives, Hypnotherapy, all bestsellers now. And Memories of the Afterlife, which is the combination of 32 of our therapists from around the world doing LBL work and offering that to different clients from all walks of life. So yeah, there's so much great information out there now.
And are you going to be at any conferences anywhere?
There's a few things coming up for us. We've got the Australian Afterlife Conference early next year. I'm currently hoping to present at the World Summit of Integrative Medicine. I'm just waiting to hear back on that one. And lots of little groups that we're doing here in Australia as well. All of that becomes, as the work gathers momentum, more and more just starts to emerge. Everyone's so interested in this work now. It's just wonderful.
If somebody wanted to do a session with you, can they do it via Skype or something? Do they have to be in person, or can they do it long distance?
Yeah. It's probably this is really deep and personal work, Janet. So we really favour that as the chosen modality. Skype is great for many things. We're on Skype now, of course, but ultimately, it would just depend on the experience of the person. But always happy to have a conversation.
Okay, great. And we have one more minute. What's the best way if somebody wants to get involved with this work to contact you and sign up?
Yeah, a lot of our research and the principles behind quantum consciousness can be found on our website that I mentioned just a moment ago, instituteforquantumconsciousness.com. There's also a personal website that I've got, which is quantumconsciousness.com.au.